place looking out. Is this your studio where you podcast?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go so far as to call it a studio. I'd call it my side porch, which I have to like heat up with a heater and.
Looks pretty studio to me.
All right, I think
I do know.
I'm live here, so I would like to hear from C3 people if it's working. This is my first time trying to go do an interview and also go live on Facebook, so.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm glad to be in this experiment with you.
Okay, I think we're good. I lost you though.
The Instagram?
Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Okay. I'm requesting to come back in again.
All right.
I think I went away just to change the setting. So now you've accepted my invite. What I have to figure out how to do is get my, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do this. It's 10:03. Welcome to C3. Do you know much about C3?
Well, I know a little of what you've told me, and I know from a man, I think I met at a Vote Common Good rally yesterday, that he's part of C3. And I try not to make C3PO jokes every time I'm saying it today.
Hey, this is the first one I've heard, so.
And I am not going to do that because it's not funny and people probably do it all the time.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe I should at least say C3 is what we call an inclusive spiritual community. And there are all kinds of people there, from religious to non-religious to agnostics, people with different kinds of Christian backgrounds. And we're sort of interested in a conversation about meaning and values. And it used to be a church, like going back to the 1800s. And it's just a series of slow evolutions that were, new to me in other words, I didn't know their story. So I see C3 as kind of one of those communities that's sort of out on the edge of the changing face of maybe religion in America or in the West. Not that we have like some sort of secret, it's just we happen to be out on the edge. And yeah, maybe that's enough said there. But I would say the community has been historically pretty involved in politics, and at least in the conversation between spirituality and politics, like what's happening here, and how do you be a citizen in the United States, and what kind of values do you bring to that conversation? So anyway, I guess I wanted to start. Well, first of all, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. We
spend
maybe just running around trying to talk to people that don't want to hear from us. So
yeah. Well, before we get to that, because that's very interesting, maybe I'd like to say, how did you end up leaving being a pastor and doing what you're doing now? Like, what is that story?
Was the question, how did I end up leaving being a pastor? Or
maybe that's not even the best way to put it. Maybe, how'd you end up doing what you're doing? A tiny bit of your story, and then why now? Why travel around in a bus trying to talk to people?
Yeah, I got into Christianity when I was a teenager, and I grew up in a family with no religion at all. My family was just non-religiously engaged, so much so that I didn't even know we were not religiously engaged, right? I like to joke, we didn't go to church every Sunday on purpose, and I didn't know it. And I had no religion, not even a religious reference. I didn't know we were not going. I didn't know things about the Bible, or I just no religious experience at all, which is a little different than someone who grows up in an agnostic family or an atheist family, where they have relationship to something to my identity. We just didn't have anything in my family, or I didn't pay much attention to it. But I had a spiritual experience at a Jesus People Church during a Passion play when I was 16. So I saw the story of Jesus acted out. This was 1983, so the tail end of the Jesus movement. And a friend that was living in the same apartment complex that I lived in, we were raised together, brought me to this play. And I saw this story that was really compelling to me, this story of humanity and God in this deep interplay. And because I didn't have the religious lens of Christianity going into it, it just seemed like a story that captured what's happening in me. Jesus as the struggling, abused one, trying to do right, protecting people, systems of power moving against him being the one trying to proclaim the story of participation in our world, and people wanting to punish that story. So rather than ever hearing God's some separate single subject that you're supposed to live in worship of, it was this very ingrained participatory story. The way I saw it, I was a 16-year-old sitting in the balcony of this, theater watching this play. And that story really captured me. And from that moment, that next day, I followed the advice of the people that I saw there who told me to go buy a Bible. And I went to a Christian bookstore that I knew of that was near my house and bought a Bible, a picture of Jesus, and a Keith Green album. And from that moment, and because it's what I think is now kind of funny, I didn't know that other people knew all about this stuff, right? Part temperament and part just experience, that I thought people just didn't know this. Became an evangelist for that perspective.
Hey, Doug, hold on a second.
My life
Let me interrupt.
Became Christians.
Can you turn your volume down all the way on your laptop so there's not an echo?
Yeah, I hear that echo too. I think it's coming from the Instagram feed.
Yeah, but if you just turn mute your computer, I don't think it will echo.
I think so that my volume is not coming through anymore.
No, well, don't mute Zoom. Just mute or just turn your volume down all the way on your laptop.
I have my headphones in, so nothing's coming out of my computer.
Oh.
So I don't know if that will work, but I'll try it.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm not sure I'm going to hear you.
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay, that's no good. Just keep going because
okay.
I just got a couple text messages that were like, I can hear a strange echo with
I do too.
Doug. So I'm not really sure what to do about it, but we're at the
How about now? Is there an echo?
I don't know. I'm not hearing it so much.
Are you hearing an echo?
No.
Okay.
Mark Zuckerberg is trying to ruin us here.
Then what if we just go like this? Is this volume any good?
It's fine.
Good or fine? A lot of people are comfortable with fine.
Yeah. I can't figure this out on the fly. So I want you to just pick up where you left off.
Okay. But you can hear it on the Zoom side. The Zoom side is working. That's what I'm concerned about. And then my 4 sons says they're not hearing an echo.
Okay. I don't know. But are they listening on Instagram or Facebook?
I don't know that either.
Yeah.
They're on Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I go like this, you don't hear an echo. All right. I'll just go like this. All right. So anyway, all that story, right? I get into this Jesus story. It's meaningful to me. I want to tell other people. That's when I really feel like I started pastoring. And because I was in an evangelical church tradition, the people, I should say this, the people I first met were from the evangelical church tradition. Campus Crusade for Christ, high school outreach people. And they just kind of put you in charge of stuff right away, right? So I started leading things and organizing things and talking to people about faith and life. And I didn't know anything. This is my favorite part of my early time in Christianity is I didn't know anything. I literally had a Bible, a Keith Green album, and an experience that I was trying to wrap together. So that's when and then from there for the next 30 years plus, whatever, I've been trying to figure out, is there meaning to the human experience as I'm having it that could correlate with that story that I was hearing from Jesus, that God and humanity have a permanent connection that's meaningful to all of us, and that we're obligated, called to live in service of one another, of the planet, to love ourselves, to love our enemies, to love our neighbors, to love God, and to be. So I started out as kind of a holist and a lovist theologically, these categories that I've had to create, and I feel like I've stayed that way all along. That it's so that's the way I think about how I got it. And then I started a church 20 years ago called Solomon's Porch. And I started that. I started that. I was Christian about 14 or 15 years in this story. Started Solomon's Porch, and and now that's kind of all old ancient story. But so I was pastoring then, and all that leads to when Donald Trump was elected. I watched religious people not only speak up against him, but to rally around him. And I watched evangelicals not condemn his cruelty, his language, his abusive policies, but to gather around him and raise the flag and salute him. And from that tradition that I was from, where, I don't know, you got to go do something about it, I decided to put the 30 years of organizing work that I had done as a pastor and as a national organizer of church leaders into action, and to ask people to join us in a national movement of people of faith stopping the re-election of Donald Trump as an act of their Christian faith.
Yeah. So here's something I've been thinking about. So I'm a child of the 80s, grew up in the 80s. My dad worked for Jerry Falwell, it was this kind of moral majority kind of uprising. What's the same now, or that is like the 80s, and what's different right now? So in other words, like the sort of the Trump, Reagan kind of era, what's different now? What's the same? And do you have an answer for that?
Been thinking a lot about it. So I have a couple reflections. The 1980s movement still had in its memory, and I know because my Christian experience came in this period, so I was hearing the echoes inside Christianity's, evangelical and conservative Christianity's messaging. It still had echoes of the late 60s and the 70s. It wasn't that long ago. Like, you think from 1965 to 1980 was less time than from where we are today to September 11th. Right? So people like us can think back to where we were on September 11th. We knew it. Some of us are still impacted by it. It's very present. Well, in 1980, that takes you all the way back to the early 60s. And in the early 60s, there was a rise of social gospel movements, especially around the civil rights movement. And it was led by religious voices. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. not being the only one. So in the memory of that religious, your dad and Falwell and others were so instrumental in their memory, what had happened in the 1960s, and they needed to be a counterbalance to it. So something that's different now is that if you go back 20 years, what we're responding to is the religious rights movement. We're not responding to the civil rights movement, right? So that's a difference. And the fact that progressive Christians like me and so many others have remained silent, or have remained out of public discourse, or if we're in public discourse and not silent, we're not claiming that Christian space and not claiming that Christian conversation, that's different. So we've almost ceded the ground of the Christian religious political conversation over to the right wing. And I think in a lot of ways, when I get real sassy about it, I like to say we turned it over to the squatters that came in and just took it over, and we just walked away and said, you go ahead and take that territory. You speak religiously. You go ahead and claim any kind of narrative that connects your Christian faith with your political life, and we won't do that. We will let that go. And I'm guilty of this too. I mean, this is confession, not just critique here. Some of us we're more likely to quote Gandhi than we are to quote Jesus in our call for a human rights change. And we're more likely to quote, Martin Luther King Jr. quoting Jesus than quoting Jesus directly if we're making these kinds of calls. So I think it's a real problem. And I think what's happened and what the difference is that now I will say, people ask me regularly, like, hey, aren't you on the religious left, political religious left? Aren't you just going to become the same as the religious right? And that's a scary notion. That's a tale of Christmas future right there that makes you wonder if you are. I have reasons why I think not the same. And there's real difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's worth speaking to for just a second. Well, let me ask you this. What is a progressive Christian and how many of them are there?
Not enough. I have a great definition, or read a great definition in an email exchange with some people from my past the other day. And somebody who came from a very conservative place, and his dad was sort of a middle of the road evangelical stalwart back in the 80s and 90s. And this is the son of that person. And he was also a pastor. And he said, my dad often would say to me that conservatives are people that want to keep the parts of our tradition that were good for humanity, and they want to make sure not to lose it. And progressives are people that want to let go of the parts of our past that were not good for humanity and want to hold on to a new one. And I liked that idea, right? That he was being generous about the fact that there's a posture that conservatives could take where they know there was something beneficial that they want to conserve. And that progressives want to lean into progress. I think he may have used the word liberal, but I think it's the same tone. That progressives say, hey, there's some things that don't exist yet for us that we have not yet experienced, and we need to lean into those things. Now, if you could put those two together at some point, and the commonality they have is what's good for humanity, what's good for human flourishing, which is a hint to what I think is different about the religious right versus what the religious left is up to, that it's a question of human flourishing rather than tribal power. And I think if we were to talk about progressive faith, it is those who want to lean forward into what would be beneficial for all of humanity. But I also think it's some leaving behind. And I think it's taking the circumstance that we live in just as seriously as the circumstances that we've come from, and trying to keep those new voices in conversation with the old voices. So when I think of myself as a progressive, I'm just saying I want to be as aware right now of what's happening in our world, what we know, what we understand, as we are of what has gone before us, because we know that what we hear from the past, it's true, but it's only part of the past, right? We're only hearing one of the conversation lines from the past, because so many have been silenced, cut out, or we just never chose to pay attention to them.
Yeah. Oh, well, how much success are you having, or any success in having a conversation with the conservative disposition? That's the way I heard it. A conservative disposition that wants to conserve something beneficial from the past, something life-giving and good, even. I mean, are you having any success in that, or is it just too polarizing?
It's hard because there are people not acting in good faith on both the conservative and the progressive side. Let me just put it this way. There are people politically, religiously, who really, what they really want to see is the elimination of the other side. Right? Their primary motivation is that you don't exist. So in politics, if we could get to 51%, then I just don't have to pay attention to you anymore. I'm just going to move you off over there. And that happens on both sides. Now, I will say I experience it 10-1 of conservatives acting that way as I do progressives. But it does exist. There are people who just want no more. They don't want there to be people who are conservatives. They don't want there to be people that are traditional Republicans. They just want them to be gone. Now, and so much of that on the right. I mean, just this fear of liberalism is unbelievable, right? Just yesterday in Holland, Michigan, where I'm sitting down in the parking lot of this. I mean, I'm on a bus, so we had a rally and some people came, and the things these protesters were saying to me were unbelievable, right? Like, you and your liberals, you all need to go away and die. And like, it is just apocalyptic about what liberalism is. I mean, ironically, these are guys all on Social Security, come to find out, right? And everything else. So, I mean, they're living in the social panoply of all this, but they really want it to be. So if you take out the people on both sides who really want the other side to not exist, there's a lot of place for conversation. And when, and it doesn't mean that it's an easy conversation, right? One of the things I've learned is that the possibility for conversation doesn't mean that it doesn't start in some hostility. The measure to me is, does it end in hostility? Not does it begin in hostility? And the only way we know if the interaction conversation is going well is if a person ends the conversation differently. So if you have time for a quick story, I would tell you one about what happened to, maybe I need to give a little context of what we're doing, but
yeah, please.
I have a story from some anti-abortion protesters that came to our rally that I could tell you about.
Yep, do it.
Okay, so we run these rally events. We travel in a big bus. It's a sleeper coach. I sleep in it. It's like a band bus. It was actually the bus that Weird Al Yankovic was on before we took it over this year. So, and it was used by the crew of Guns N' Roses. So it's got some real, juju to it. So that's the kind of bus. It's big. It's painted on the sides. Says faith, hope, and love for a change on election day. There's a map. That has lots of images on it, religious images and Americana images and all this stuff. So it's a real thing. People think it's some right-wing bus because anytime and it has Vote Common Good on the side, which is the name of our organization. So when people see vote and faith, they immediately think it's religious, right? It's gonna. So we did an event in Pittsburgh, and the Congressman Lamb was with us speaking at the event. We did it with a group called Catholics for Biden. So it was that group and a group of right-wing, their definition, not mine, anti-abortion activists came and were protesting our event. So we were negotiating out how this went. So afterward, we were talking with these people for a long time, 30, 40, 45 minutes, moving around in little conversations. One of the women was so aggressive. I said, look, if you're truly, she said, as a pro-life person, I said, look, if you're pro-life, I differ with you on if we should criminalize abortion, but if you're pro-life, I'm sure you're going to agree with me that we need to demilitarize the United States and we need to stop wars because wars are violent and they kill innocents. I'm sure you're with me on the planet and making sure we care for the planet because of the damage that it does to life on this planet. I'm sure you're with me on the death penalty and you want to abolish the death penalty and you want to limit the amount of guns that we have in our society because guns cause such damage. So I'm sure you're with me on all these. And she said, I'm not with you on any of those. And she said this, in fact, if you or any of your Black Lives Matter loving friends were to come into my house, I'd shoot you dead myself. Okay. And I said, well, that's a little aggressive. And then we go on for another few minutes. And then she says, but I do want to take one of your yard signs home with me. We have these yard signs that say faith, hope, and love. And then it says, and then it lays out saying faith, not fear, hope, not hate, love, not lies. So here she says, I would shoot you dead if you came into my house, but I'd love to take one of those yard signs home with me. And I said, well, you have to make a donation for one of those. She goes, okay. She goes to her car, gets $20, comes over and gives us a $20 donation and goes home with a yard sign that says, Vote Common Good on it. Hope, not hate, faith, not fear, love, not lies. And I thought, that's the message she agrees on. In one sense, but then she's got this whole other narrative, which is, I would shoot you dead if you walked into my house uninvited. And it's so confusing, right? Like, what story are we in here? Is there a place that we could find some commonality on those issues? Now, for her, the fact that I'm not for criminalizing abortion means that I'm a baby killer. She told me that repeatedly. And so there's a block there that's going to keep us apart, but there might be some other place where there's a bridge that could bring us together.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's take a quick pause here. I want to hop off the gram here because I keep getting endless texts that are like, there's some kind of echo, not on Instagram, but on Facebook. So let's just end our Instagram thing and stay on the Zoom.
Goodbye, Instagram. It's been good knowing you. Yeah, I do appreciate that. I do appreciate we tried. See, this is the inclusive impulse. You just really want to try and
just
include
trying
everyone.
to include more and more. Just bringing the left of Instagram and the right of Facebook together again. You know. And
yeah, and then sometimes it's a little uncomfortable for some. And
it is. It's like they're hearing echoes, and they're not sure. They can't really decipher what's going on.
But also, really, Facebook, Instagram, you couldn't figure this out, how you could broadcast to Instagram.
Yeah, who knows? So that's a very interesting story. So what I hear, like sometimes I think about, it's very hard to trust that right now in our landscape that there's a core of humanity that connects us, and because everything on our Facebook feed and everything on whatever Instagram and the news, and it's, as you know, it's just like about division, trying to exploit the very innate, and I think that's the right way of putting it, tendency. It's one of our instincts to protect, to circle the wagons, to jockey for a sense of rightness or belonging. But all of those platforms, including the news, exploits all that stuff, and it's hard to believe in. And I guess a core that unites us. And I think that's interesting about your story, because to hear faith, hope, and love, I mean, who possesses those? They're not in possession. No one possesses those, and all people possess the capacities for those things. So I don't know. I mean, I think I just think it's interesting. You're traveling around the country with a thing that says vote common good. And that already kind of evokes a certain question. Like, well, what is that? And it's simply impossible. There will never be America that tips one way. I mean, I could be wrong on that. I mean, maybe there's a sense of progress over time, but it's not like we can just eliminate half of the country, like you're saying at the beginning. Partly because I think conservative and liberal are dispositions, and there's science now to support the notion. It's, in other words, people seem to be wired a certain way. Anyway, so let me ask you a question though about what you think is at stake. What's at stake in the present election that seems, apocalyptic, or that would be one way of putting it, but I don't mean that in like end of the world. I just mean it like in the sense of to reveal, what's being revealed, what's at stake right now that's revealing the nature of the thing we call America. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually think of it that there's an apocalyptic moment in that sort of more popular sense of the term, which is the end of the world, like what's ending, like the destruction. I know that the word apocalypse means to reveal, but people use it, in that kind of end of the world scenario. I like both of them because I do think there's some things that are at risk of never coming back. Like I do believe that with this president, if this president is reelected and is told by the country, the path you have been on is the path that we condone, that the presidency will be ultimately reshaped, that a sense that the federal government's, the side of the federal government that the presidency is committed to, which is the only elected office that represents everyone, right? Every other elected office has a constituency. The presidency is everyone. And if that office is endorsed by the American people to be one that only represents my people, only represents my voters, only represents my states, red states versus blue states, if what Donald Trump has proposed to the American people, that we should divide up this country and that the presidency will serve only one side of this country, it will fundamentally change the nature of what this experiment has been. Or better said, it will show that this experiment has failed. And I really do believe that that is what is fundamentally at stake with the presidency. Setting aside all of the like constitutional norms and thises and that's that will come and go, and if the unitary executive theory that Bill Barr and the extreme right wing of the Republican Party hold to. I mean, not getting into all the minutia of all that. Just the idea that Donald Trump has made it perfectly clear. I have my people, and then there's your people. I mean, Mike Pence literally even said it when he talked about we should care for the Black people. We should care for poor people. Us and them, right? It is so built into their narrative and to the Trump narrative about what this country is. That's what is at risk, that no longer will there be any part of the federal government that is not fundamentally partisan. Now, I'll give a parenthetical for a moment here just to say, I think the biggest change we need to make in our political system is that the presidency should become a nonpartisan position the moment you swear yourself into the presidency.
Is that possible?
Sure. Parties don't exist in any constitutional sense. They're not mandated. We already have many parties. I know people think there's only two, but that's because you think only one of these two are going to win. But there's a lot. There's a Green Party, there's a Constitutional Party, there's a Libertarian Party, there's an Independence Party. We already have multiple parties. So you don't have to be part of any of them. You could be just an independent and hang around. Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat and Donald Trump wasn't really a Republican. And because that's just a notion of who you're going to pal around with. So they don't exist. But what does exist is you could say that the presidency has to not lend itself to any political party. A lot of mayors in towns are this way, right? You might have a nonpartisan mayor, or you might have a nonpartisan school board. So you could have this, and this would be the biggest change, I think, so that when someone becomes a president, they're no longer the head of their party, and both parties have to contend with the person that is the executive of the executive branch and has to represent all the people of the United States. So I think this is what's at risk with Donald Trump. Every other president has owned that that's their role, is to make sure that they are the president of the United States, and not to treat the presidency in the possessive, my generals, my people, my states. And if this is endorsed by the American people on election day, look, what Mitch McConnell just said about why he believes that he should nominate and pass a Supreme Court nominee of Donald Trump's and wouldn't do it in 2016 with a Barack Obama, is because he said in his public statement, printed public statement, that the people of the United States voted for an increase in the Republican majority in the Senate on the judiciary. So their responsibility is to give them a judiciary that matches the president. That's his logic. They've claimed this straight out. Donald Trump will move to fundamentally change the presidency, and Bill Barr will make sure that that's enacted. I really don't think I'm just making this up. I really do think it's just listening to what they're saying. So I think that, and then I think there's real cost to people. Look, kids in cages, forced sterilization of women in federal custody, building walls and borders, separating ourselves from the rest of the country, damaging the environment, education that is moved into the private space away from the public space. I mean, these are all fundamental shifts, and every presidency is about fundamental shifts. So on the policy side, the radical Republican ideas will become more mainstream. I mean, we have a real competition now, right? A lot of people have said that the radical left ideas have become mainstream, and so will the radical Republican ideas. But even if you set aside all policy issues, what we're going to fundamentally say is that the Donald Trump approach to the presidency is the one that's endorsed, and these people will choose to make that permanent in this country. And I think it's damaging to. So now, what it'll mean is, the world order will have to be reshaped. and the role of the United States in it, where it's an isolationist country that is just literally going to be doing business deals. I would say horrible business deals, ridiculously bad, referring to an arms sale to countries as Middle East peace.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that we're going to have. A total conflating of a sale to peace. Because, you know, all we're looking for is just, can we pick up another buyer for the crappy products that this president wants to pitch around the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not the president. I mean, that's our value system is rooted in the economy. I mean, this is a problem of the Western world. We judge everything as good or bad based on its value in a kind of hierarchical economy of dollars and cents. So, so just a quick question here. I don't want to go too much longer. So, I mean, do you see Biden as wanting to be a kind of president for all people in the United States of America, or is he just going to offer the left's version of the thing that the right is peddling? You know, is he going to say my country, you know, my people versus, you know, Donald Trump support? That's the problem. That was the problem with Hillary saying the deplorables comment. And all of a sudden it opened up a little window. I mean, maybe, I don't know exactly what she meant by that, but it opened up a little, oh, she's playing the same us versus them game.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, this is the question. And I was a big Hillary supporter, and, you know, I mean, just personally, I'm not in any real way. And I know what people didn't trust her. They believed she was a divider. She believed that the Clintons had an approach to politics that separated people. I didn't think so. People did. And when they heard her say that, it didn't tell them something new. It confirmed.
Yeah, it's like confirmation bias.
To be true. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, well, at least she flat out said it. Well, Trump has just been saying that nonstop.
Yeah, right? he never said anything different. Yeah.
He never done it. Yeah. Well, Joe Biden. Well, I think so. I mean, I'm a Joe Biden surrogate, meaning I speak out publicly and ask people to vote for Joe Biden. I want them to vote for Joe Biden. I think on this topic, Joe Biden has shown himself to be someone who does believe that the role of the federal government is to care for all the people. And he's tried to do that as a senator, and he's tried to do that as a vice president. I think the impulse that we heard from Barack Obama in 2004, when he gave the nomination speech for John Kerry, where he said that there is no red America, there's no blue America, there's the United States of America. A lot of people rallied around that. I don't know if you watched his speech way back then and thought, who's that guy? And then he ends up becoming the president. And he was mocked. He was mocked for that when he started running for the presidency and as a president, because there's a lot of pressure on the left to not do this sort of what they call a kumbaya moment, say we're all the same, we're all in this together, the divisions are real, one side has to win over the other, there's a power dynamic. So there was a lot of pressure. And I will say, I'm not sure the Obama administration did a good enough job on making sure that he believed that there was not red America and blue America. There was a bit of the tone of us versus them that existed. I think they could have gone much further. Will Joe Biden? I sure hope so. But I heard this analogy from one of our presenters yesterday. He said, look, the country's on fire. One candidate is holding a gas can. The other one is holding a fire hose. Now, I know you don't vote for the arsonist with the gas can who's burning it down. And will one fire hose put out the fire that is in this country? No, it's going to need more fire hoses. But I'd rather have a guy with a fire hose that we can join than a guy with a gas can that we have to worry about wrestling out of his hand. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Joe Biden is going to build a more empathic, a more connected narrative of the presidency that I think is crucial for this country, and try to reverse the tone and the attitude that has gone on from this president. Whether it's saying that the press are the enemy of the people, or saying that his people in his own administration are enemies of the state, or saying that governors of a different party hate America. You are not going to hear that from Joe Biden. There is no doubt. People of good conscience know that stuff is not true. They know that it's hype and rhetoric. And the fact that Republicans continue to give the sitting president of the United States a pass by saying, well, he's just doing politics. No, he's not. No one has ever done this before. We've had a lot of politicians. We've had, 44 other presidents. They never did this. He is a unique threat to the Constitution to the notion of America and to the well-being of this planet and everyone who lives on it. Like it's, and I know, like, this is why I travel the country and try to do anything I can for, been doing it for almost the last 2 years, and this all of 2020, almost nonstop, because I truly believe that my own Christian call is to communicate to the Christian community that I have some access to, that what is at stake here is not red versus blue. This isn't John Kerry and George Bush. This isn't Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, or Barack Obama and John McCain. This isn't even Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. We all thought Donald Trump would never actually be the person, be as president, the person that he was as a candidate. Mm-hmm. Nobody thought that. Everybody thought, okay, he's just, he's just campaigning, and the weight of the presidency will lean on him, and it will moderate. Now, I didn't believe it would moderate him enough. I thought he would be a real damage to the country. It's been way worse. The "it is what it is" line about nearly 200,000 people having died when he said it. It is what it is. What can we do? Like the hands up, nothing we can do, blended with incompetency, blended with cruelty, blended with no one matters except me and my people. That is, and again, if that is baptized in the political sense in the vote on November 3rd, that's where the majority of the people in the majority of the electoral college states vote. I guess, as my friend Tom put it to me once after Trump was elected, he said, well, the upside to being disillusioned is you get to drop your illusions. And if we move into a period of disillusionment where we realize, yeah, we've been lying to ourselves about what this country was all along. It's always wanted basically to be this country, and now it has found its form. So I'm just going to give it all I've got to make sure that nobody sits it out, that nobody feels like this is just same old. Now, I don't know about you, Kent, but I think that in 2016, had the country rerun the election 2 days later on Thursday, I don't think Donald Trump would have won. I think a lot of people who didn't vote for Hillary or wanted to give Donald Trump a chance, if they had had just 48 hours to rethink what their vote was going to be, I don't think he would have won Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, maybe even Florida. I think we've been living as a country in political regret for 4 years, and that regret has turned to grief and to pain and to anger, and we're now trying to motivate people to rectify that. But that I could be totally wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's land the plane here. I just want to thank you for coming on today and speaking, I think, honestly and in a heartfelt way about what you see going on and what's at stake, and a little of why you're doing what you're doing. And I appreciate even the call to bring people to a sense of question around what is the common good beyond what's good for my whatever. If you identify as a red or a blue person, I mean, it sounds pretty insane, but I think so. I just appreciate it. And I appreciate your language around these things, faith and hope and love. And I do wish you an audience in the last month or so here, calling people to do some self-examination and some critical thinking and some long-term thinking. I mean, because also what's at stake is not just the next 4 years, but the next 40 years, And so anyway, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, any final words?
Well, I appreciate you, my friend, and all that you're up to, and the good people of C3. We're in Grand Rapids today at 3:00 out at Rosa Park. Is that the name of it?
Rosa Park Circle. Yep, right
Rosa
downtown.
Park Circle. So 3:00, and if anybody's up for that or wants to spread the word and know that we're out there, musicians, singers, poets. It's a bit of a rally. It's a bit of a revival. It's a bit of a political call. It's a bit of a carnival. It's super fun. We have a postcard campaign. People might be interested if they're wondering what they can do, that sends postcards to faith voters. We have a curated list that we give you 15 addresses, and you send postcards that we have that are have a message to Christian voters on one side that includes the line, please join me in stopping Donald Trump on election day, and then a chance for you to write your own message on the back. And we deliver those, we get those to you. You can go on the website at votecommongood.com and get them, or come to our rally and we'll send you home with them. And all those people are right in Grand Rapids and Holland. Our Michigan districts are those districts. So you'd be sending them to neighbors. And we're trying to flood 10,000 postcards into voters in that area. Just giving them a direct ask, because we're so divided in this country and we can't go door to door, but we can go mailbox to mailbox. And we know that there's enough people in enough houses that are just feeling not quite right. And everyone in their world is telling them to just stay the course and keep voting for this man. And for some, what they need is just that invitation into a different community to be able to join it. I really think, and Ken, you've been so good at this in your professional life, is that people need an invitation into another world. We all do. we very rarely sort of stumble into it on our own. We don't even know it exists or see it. And it might seem impossible that people don't know that there's other people of faith and conscience that are asking them to abandon voting for this president. But I meet them every day. They really have never heard anything like this. Like, people walk up to me and say, you're a pastor and you're saying, I've never heard a single pastor say what you're saying. Like, I'm like, how is that possible in 2020 that you have never heard? And they are serious as can be. Their world is as insulated as my world and your world. So they're just hearing the only things they've heard the entire time. So.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. And wishing you all the best.
And you and C3 friends.
See ya.